Attention water treatment experts. Pyxis Lab is your trusted PTSA partner. Pyxis offers not only the world's leading devices for PTSA fluorescent detection, but also provide the tracer chemical at unbeatable prices. Our ST500 series of inline PTSA devices ensures widely accurate monitoring while compensating for color and turbidity. Protect your system assets today and gain peace of mind with Pyxis Lab. Don't settle for less when it comes to your water treatment needs. Go to scalinguph2o.com/Pyxis. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/PYXIS. Pyxis, because water professionals deserve better. Qualichem, supporting the water treatment community since 1990. Qualichem offers some of the best formulation expertise in the industry. Qualichem offers a wide array of house formulations, or Qualichem can help you with your own formulations. At Qualichem, we never sell direct to the end user, so you'll never have to worry about competing with your blender. To find out more about Qualichem, go to scalinguph2o.com/Qualichem. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/Qualichem. At Qualichem, we know the blender matters. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O Podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up your systems. I'm your host, Trace Blackmore. And folks, thank you for being part of the Scaling Up Nation and listening to the Scaling Up H2O Podcast. And Nation, as you know, sometimes I like to look and see what historically has happened on the air date of this particular episode. And I did that. And in 1975, on this very day, what do you think of when you hear that music? Everybody has the same image in their mind. Of course, that is Jaws. And 50 years ago today, Jaws, the movie, was released, and the shark population was never the same. That was a fantastic movie for its time. It changed everybody's mind on how they thought about taking a swim in the ocean. And Nation, as a scuba dive instructor, I will tell you that that movie was probably the most horrible thing to ever happen to sharks. Now, I had the privilege about a decade ago to spend a week in Honduras, and I was scuba diving. I was there with a group of people, and there was a doctor in sharkology. That's actually called secilecology. I think I'm saying that correctly. He was a PhD all in sharks, and he was leading shark dives each and every day. And I know you've seen the Jaws movie and you are thinking that I am crazy, but I love this guy, and I tried to go out every time he was going out collecting research, teaching things to people. He was about 4'9" tall. He was one of the shortest scuba divers that I have ever dove with, but he was brilliant when it came to sharks. And he taught me so much during that week about sharks, things that I did not know. And here's what I want to share with you about sharks, because the movie was great, but it is not the image that we want with sharks. So sharks are an apex predator. And folks, we are fishing them out of existence. In fact, 250 million sharks are fished, killed, however you want to say it, each and every year. And the population decline in sharks is having an effect in various areas across the planet. There are areas where reefs are dying. Now, why are the reefs dying when the sharks go away? Well, I said they're apex predators. Now, what that means is they are the very top of the food chain, and they eat things that eat other things. And one of my favorite things to see when I am scuba diving is a ray. They are beautiful. Rays eat all of the filter feeders, which are clams, oysters, all the little mollusks type items. I need James Courtney on this episode because he knows all about those. But what I know is the rays will eat those, and because the sharks are the only things that eat the rays, there's nothing to cull the ray population. And they are overeating reefs of all their filter feeders. And because of that, sunlight can't penetrate through the water and make it to the reef, and the reefs are dying. You can see areas all over the globe where the shark population has declined and the reefs are dying. So why am I telling you all this? Well, one, I told that doctor of sharkology that to pay him back for all of the great information and great scuba diving that he shared with me during that week in Honduras, that I would share with as many people as I could what he told me to share about sharks, and that is we can do something about this. Now, if you are still scared of Jaws, well, you probably should be scared of Jaws, but don't eat Jaws, and that is the issue. Folks, what happens is fisheries will fish for sharks. They will troll these long lines out behind their vessels. They will catch hundreds of sharks. They will pull them up on their deck. They will cut off their dorsal fin, which is the topmost fin on their body. That's the only thing that they harvest, and then they throw the shark back into the water. Well, sharks need to be moving in order to breathe, in order to process the oxygen in the water. They can no longer move. They just sink to the bottom of the ocean where they suffocate and die. And this is happening 250 million times plus to sharks because of this, just for their dorsal fins. And what is the use of their dorsal fins? Well, shark fin soup. So here is my ask that was the doctor of sharkology's ask to me for sharing all that great information and all those great scuba diving with me for a week. He wanted me to tell everybody that I could tell this information. If you are ever in a restaurant that serves shark fin soup, politely let the establishment owner what I just told you, that we need sharks in our population so we have all these amazing reefs that we can go scuba dive, and of course all the other wonderful things that reefs allow our planet to have. And because we are not taking care of the shark population with things like shark fin soup, you are not going to be purchasing any food at this establishment. And now that the owner has that information, you encourage them to take the shark fin soup off of their menu. Folks, I have been to several restaurants here in the Atlanta metropolitan area where I have had that very conversation, and each and every time the owner of the establishment had no idea. Now, I don't know if they took it off the menu, but I was able to tell that story, and hopefully that story was told to somebody else. So nation, now you hear it. Now you, when you hear this theme, you might be thinking if you want to get back into the ocean, but I also want you to think that sharks are a valuable contributor to our planet, and we're going to share that message anytime we see shark fin soup. Scale Note Nation, I bet you did not turn on today's episode and thought we were going to be talking about soup. You never know what you're going to learn on a Scaling Up H2O podcast. And of course, somebody that helps us learn each and every episode, well, that's our friend James McDonald. And here is a brand new What Do You Know?
Hello and welcome to What Do You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, what is the breakpoint chlorination ratio of chlorine to ammonia required to reach a true free chlorine residual? While the stoichiometric answer is 7.6 to 1 of chlorine as Cl2 to ammonia as nitrogen, competing reactions may make the actual ratio 8 to 1 or even 10 to 1 or above. This is why it is important to develop a breakpoint chlorination curve at varying dosages to confirm. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Well, thank you, James. And Scale It Up Nation, one of my favorite things is to go to events because I get to meet all of you at these events. And one of my favorite events to go to is the AWT technical training. As you know, we are the official voice of the AWT. We have partnered with the AWT, and we're so excited about that. So we're going to get so much great information from the AWT board that we can bring to you. Just like next year, we're going to be going to Frisco most likely twice. And you know that because we had our AWT president, John Caloritas, on the program just a few short weeks ago, telling us what they were talking about during board meetings. So as soon as we have those dates for the technical training for next year, we will make sure that we get that information out to you. But as I said, I love sharing events with you, specifically ones around the AWT. And by far, my favorite one is always the technical training. And at this past technical training, just a few months ago, I met a gentleman from Australia. His name is Jake Elliott, and he came all the way from Australia to Texas because he heard about the technical training on the podcast, and he wanted to be a part of it. And Jake came up to me, introduced himself, and said, I listen to the podcast. I am a member of the Scaling Up Nation. And we got to talking, and we are going to try to get Jake on the program so I can interview him. And that's the thing. When you introduce yourself to me and you got an interesting story, chances are I'm going to figure out how to interview you so I can introduce you to the rest of the Scaling Up Nation. So Nation, it's my hope that you are taking advantage of all things that we talk about here on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And if there's an event that's close to you, or maybe it's not close to you, like Jake was in Australia and he flew to Texas because he wanted to be part of the event, you take advantage of that because you're going to meet new people, you're going to learn new things, and you're going to start to know things you didn't even know you did not know. And Nation, one of the things that we do each and every week is we interview people to hopefully introduce you to information you didn't know you didn't know. Nation, here's that interview. My lab partner today is Kevin Kuhne, founder and president of Energy Resource Products. Kevin, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Trace, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to learn a lot today, but before we talk about what you do and why you're here, do you mind telling the Scaling Up Nation a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm married for 43 years, living in the great state of South Dakota. Got 2 children, 2 adult children. Actually, I have my first grandchild on the way, so I'm very excited.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm the head coach here at Energy Resource Products. We're a privately held company. And my passions are bicycling, and we just closed out the pheasant hunting season. So I have a new puppy this year. So she got her first taste of pheasant hunting. So we had a great time.
So you're the founder and president, but you said your title is coach. I love that. Explain that a little more for us.
So I'll date myself here, but many years ago when I first got started and moved into the cellular industry, it was all new back then. So we had to hire teams and build stuff. And what I found, my philosophy has always been about being like a coach. The goal is if you can help the team be successful, then you meet your goals. It's not about meeting mine. And all those goals rolled up. So the team just started calling me coach. And my job was to block and tackle and help them get there. So that's where it came from. It sort of stuck.
I have a mentor that says anytime you're in a supervisory position, consider your title, whatever it is, put coach behind it. And
Exactly.
I love that you have that attitude.
Yep. It's done well. And it was just the thrill is to watch your team succeed, right? And that's the ultimate win.
So just hearing you talk about your team, I have no doubt you have an amazing culture at your company.
We focus on it. It's all about the people, right? I mean, if you have the right people, you can accomplish anything. And they bring so much to the table. It's really about drawing out of them all of the talents and skills they have. And they come up with great ideas. Sometimes you think you got it figured out, and the team really contributes and helps push everything forward.
Well, if you would, tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so we're a technology company. We provide software, firmware, hardware development, but we're primarily focused on, I guess, what people would call the Internet of Things or artificial intelligence, providing solutions to customers to help them reach their objectives, their targets. In other words, better outcomes, improved outcomes.
So being in the water treatment industry, how would my company partner with your company?
Yeah, so we have a line of products that go into the field. Some people would call it a controller. We refer to it as a computer that controls, changing the edge device. There's a wealth of information to be harvested from equipment that's in the field. Traditional equipment today doesn't do that. So what we do is partner by providing that information in a way that becomes actionable. And it's easy to interpret, easy to access, easy to interpret, and changes the outcomes at the client when we're facing the customer.
There's a term called smart tech. Can you define that for us?
Yeah, smart tech, we throw lots of terms around and they mean different things to different people and what they think that should be. The smart tech is basically just collecting information in a way that it can be processed and utilized. And then to do that, though, it may require different equipment. It may require different communication protocols. It may require different ways to gather that information. And then once that information is gathered, you can purpose it in all sorts of different ways. And those then translate to efficiencies, profitability, customer engagement, all of those things. So the smart tech is identifying those areas that we can enhance information, translate it, and then act on it. And that's really what it is in its simplest form.
So let's take, for example, I have a customer, they've got a cooling tower and a boiler, and those systems are online. I can access that. I can change set points. I can see things. But now working with you, what are some more things I can do?
Yeah, so one of the things we talk about is AI moves up that we talk about processing power. So we move all of the transactions up into the cloud, right? So we have a lot of the horsepower from the server capability. So now you're talking about where I was getting a report sharing with me what happened, say, over the last week. What if I could get that information in real time? So now I know, let's say a pump is failing. What if I could tell you the pump is failing before it actually starts dropping the value? We have customers right now. So predictive failure, right? And we want to solve that issue before something goes wrong. And we spend all that time with the client trying to explain what we missed. So for example, from a Legionella perspective, let's say you're not feeding or making the point you want on a spike feed. Today, we get a report a couple of days later. We know there was a failure. We go there. With smart technology, we can identify that problem in real time. There's a failure right now, so we can act on it immediately and put eyes on the problem.
Can you tell us a real world example where that's just save the day?
Yeah, we've had a number of situations where pump runtime is a fascinating issue. Feeder pumps, right? Lines start to plug or calcify. We start to have some problems. And even though the value in the system, the wet test or the test is still reporting, what's happening is that the pump is struggling. The feeder pump is struggling. And pumps never fail on a Monday. They fail on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, right? That's when everything breaks. So in those cases, the customer was able to identify the problem on an early Friday morning. They resolved the issue before everything went offline. Then that would have been very expensive to fix in that situation. We see that kind of example all the time. Or sensor failure. We see a sensor failing, pumps are overfeeding, and they're jacking up chemicals. They came in on a Monday morning and there was foam all over the floor because the inhibitor was running all weekend long. There are ways with smart technology to prevent that from happening.
You mentioned AI, so now we can take the data and there's actually some sort of artificial intelligence that's doing something with it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so by moving that data up to the cloud, what we're really looking for is the ability to start gathering disparate values and start running calculations on them. So if you have something that there's not necessarily a sensor for, or you have to compare different values, those values can be compared in real time and create their own data stream. So just like we might data log an ORP setting, if there was a value that you were multiplying different things or running algorithms, you can actually data log those in real time as that sensor data is coming in. So you can track it and report on it just like you would anything else.
Yeah, I remember back in the early 2000s when you could actually remote into controllers at your customer accounts, and it was just so difficult to get them to run what you needed them to run so you could access them. And then it was difficult for them to put access on their network so you could get in. And that really hasn't changed. How we get in it has changed quite a bit. But we still have objections like that. I know you deal with those all day long. The listeners of this podcast are dealing with those. What advice do you have with them? Because if we can have access safely to the data, there's so much that we all can get out of it.
So what you're really addressing is security, and that's the real roadblock. And the other thing too is a lot of operators in the field, they're not necessarily security or technology wizards, and they're afraid of this. So we actually engage with our customers. I've sat on numerous calls, or our team has sat on calls. Matter of fact, we have a deployment now going out that's replacing 1,000 installations, and that we were deeply integrated with the IT team from the customer. So the real key there is that the edge equipment, that computer that I was talking about, really has to have a computer type basis of operation, and that resolves most of that issue. So now we use terms like MQTT and different communication protocols, which is deep in the weeds, but those are the terms that make sense. So a lot of edge devices like controllers today, I can dial into it, but the data it's sending out is not in an IT usable format. So IT departments bristle at this when they see it. They said, you're going to send me an Excel spreadsheet? I don't want that. That's, back in 1985. The other thing is the security protocols. So by using a computer at the edge, we're able to invoke Cisco-type securities, things that you have on your computer and that IT people love, and they're able to give you access. They're really worried about somebody punching the firewall. The other thing is, in the technology that we're using today, the human's not really interacting with the controller. You're talking to a server, and the server then is communicating to that. We're not opening up a web server. There's no mail servers on board. Think about if you've got a location with a customer with 50 locations and you lose that rep, he moves on. Now I got to go to each one of those devices and I have to touch each one of those devices to change the password, to change the email address. What if I could just do that from a console and just make one single keystroke and I can take out that employee and I can put in a new one? The other big security issue is firmware updates. As, like you had mentioned, devices are being more connected. Everything's being more connected. When I connect a device, they're really concerned about how that's going to be accessed. And so by setting up these security protocols, they're much more comfortable having these devices available, and you'll get the access you need and how the data comes out of there.
The other side of that, of course, there's an extra cost. So we've got to sell that to all the stakeholders. What advice do you have for doing that?
Yeah, so the cost is not as much as we would think because the technology is advanced. And as it continues to advance, it drives the cost down. So in many cases, it's very comparable to what we're spending today. If we're putting a gateway, for example, where you're paying a fee for that, you can encompass much of the same cost there. The other thing is when you're working on ROI and you're talking to the customer, we need to be really good about being specific, really good discovery. Sales skills never change, right? The fundamentals are the fundamentals. So when talking to the customer and really understanding the application, if we can identify really specify down to some of those key wins, right? Instead of just throwing terminology, hey, we're going to give you this really cool AI and do this. If you can identify those, it's usually pretty easy to get to a very substantial ROI. For example, on the security side and the ROI, one of the things IT people are concerned about is firmware updates. Once you've connected a controller, it's now out on the internet, right? It's out there. And right now you have to run around and stick a USB stick in and update the firmware. And so we found in many cases, equipment that's way behind. And it might operate fine. However, it's got security challenges now. There's risk. So on equipment that we're selling and we have in the field, just like your cell phone, you wake up in the morning and it tells you there's a firmware update and it just automatically updates. You don't have to touch that equipment. So those are the kinds of things that are really making a change in the market.
Well, there's still some very skeptical stakeholders out there that you've got to win over. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so if I go back to my early cellular days, and I know people today think cellular is like, hey, I just buy a cell phone, you don't think about it. But in the early days, it was quite a challenge to get people on board. And it started with the distributors. The distributors didn't know what people were going to buy them. They had a phone in their home. They weren't going to do that. So we worked on education. So the Best Buys of the world and all the retailers, they weren't up for selling cell phones to start with. So we worked on education. They were waiting for the customer to come to them. And we've got the same issue in the water treatment industry that I'm selling what I sell. It works. So what happened then, we went back into sort of the direct sales. And the other thing is understanding that your customer is already integrating AI or smart tech, as we would call it, into many facets of their business. And we've been on a number of calls with our water treater customers. We've sat with the customer and they were thrilled. And the questions were, where have you been? I've been waiting for this technology to arrive. And so if we're not aware of it, or if we're not looking for those opportunities, we're not expressing it to our customer. And the challenge there is that somebody will. And for example, in this large deployment we're doing, the competitor didn't have anything to bring to the table. There was no differential value, and the entire account just went away without them knowing it happened. So I would let you know that our position on this is that many stakeholders really are ready to get there if they understand. So once they see a couple of apps, or you talk about a couple of the wins in there, for example, exception management. If you just bring up a mobile app and I can show my entire customer base and I just look for what's red, everything that's green I know is good, I can focus on what the priority, how much time or how valuable that is. And I can access and get quick access to things without having to physically be there. So the stakeholders, it's really about identifying that simple win and then getting them started.
So it's so much easier to convince people to, okay, pay this extra fee. Now we have cellular instead of having to run a line there. And now it's in their infrastructure. That solves so many problems. But let's face it, we don't put the equipment where it gets the best reception. It's down into a mechanical room that's 3 stories underground. So what do we do with that?
Yeah, so the first thing is that's a really great point. So as these technologies evolve and continue to change, most people just don't understand the difference. So for example, the modem that you have in your cell phone is not the same modem that we're using. One of the fastest growing areas in cellular is what they call machine to machine. So the cellular modem that we use inside of our devices is not the same modem, and we're getting about 99.5% penetration. So AT&T and Verizon have entire bands that are designed to penetrate buildings to get down into those locations, and we have lots of success with that. You can do remedial things, if you do run into a situation, you can do a booster antenna or what have you, but that's generally the exception for us. It's having the right equipment. And again, this is rethinking that edge device. It's a completely different communication protocol.
Now, you mentioned you don't have to go to each individual controller. There's a dashboard, for lack of a better term. And now you can make global changes. That saves so much time. Can you maybe, through the podcast, create a vision of what that looks like?
Yeah, so as this evolves, if I'm an operator, I really want to turn my customer base into my own little enterprise, right? I want it to be an enterprise application. So I want to be able to log in to a single dashboard. Matter of fact, if I backed up a step, it really changes the way I do my business. I start my day off sitting down maybe with a cup of coffee before I roll, right? Before I get in the car and go out, I look at my installations. I look for those things that are telling me there's a problem. But with a simple login, I can access all of my sites at one dashboard. And I don't necessarily need to drill down. I can create favorites, just like you do in my other applications. So I can put my top focused accounts right there. So in a single click, I can be on that application. That I can see log files. One of the biggest issues is what happens when something goes wrong. We've all heard it. I never touched anything. It just broke. And now I can look in and say, geez, Bob logged in yesterday at 3:00 and I see he changed the set point like I asked him not to do, right? And so I can see that information. So basically, you're going to log in, you're going to go to a dashboard, you're going to see all your customers, you're going to click on there. From there, you're going to have easy access. You can create dynamic dashboards on the fly. So if you have key things that you want to see, you don't have to go in and look for the reports. You just click a button and there's your dynamic dashboard. And then you got day picker tools. Now I can slide back and forth. I can see all of this and manage all of this from my cell phone. It's all integrated into my cell phone, my iOS or my Android. I can simply click on a button and make those edit changes. I don't have to go through a third-party application. I can add users on the fly. So if somebody says, hey, I need to add a user, I don't need to go to that device. I just simply log in, add the user, and assign them to that device. And now they have access and multiple permissions. So anything that you think of that you use today, like the way you access bank accounts, weather apps, anything, is basically you're going to see that same interface. So it's very intuitive. A lot of people shy back and say, I'm afraid I'm not going to learn this. It's going to be hard to use. And once they've done it, they said, hey, this is just like everything else I do. For example, passwords. We don't use passwords anymore. When we log into banks, we put in an email address and we get what we call an OTP, right? A one-time passcode. In our system, you just simply enter that information and a code shows up on your phone or in your email or both. And now you have your access. It's great security. IT guys love it. I'm never calling customer support because I forgot the password or I lost an employee and he changed a password. Now I can't access the device immediately. Same thing for my customer. I can just simply go in, and if my customer adds an employee, I can be sitting at home and add that user in. And, I get a call. We see these on the support desk. Hey, we'd like to add a new employee. So that's that whole, just simplifies that entire process, saves a ton of time. The other thing is we've had situations where somebody didn't look at the information before they got there and they came unprepared. And now they're like, hey, I'm not going to be back on this job site for 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe it's going to be 4 weeks. So now what do I do? Where if they'd have prepared for that, they basically could have come in fully prepared and solved that issue. Or been on customer support talking it through while they're behind the windshield. They're driving before they get on site and use that windshield time. So there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity dialing into that interface, seeing what's really going on. The days of getting an email every morning, this is one of my favorites. We talked to people and they said, well, I want my morning email of 30 controllers that sent me all this data. I said, well, the data is 8 hours old. What do you care? He goes, well, I have it. I said, well, why wouldn't you just log in, see it all, and it's all stored for you? You don't have to store any PDF files. It's always available anytime you want it. And then you can export what you need, but it's all stored for you and it's all dynamic.
So when we purchase the controller from the manufacturer, they have their user interface and we can log in through them. And now we are using your company. How do those two things work together? And then what do you get with both of them or either or?
Yeah, it's a great question. So because everything's computer-based, we have permission-based. So you can, as an operator, set behind the scenes in that application and create your own set of snapshots or dashboards, utilities, which is totally transparent to the client. At the same time, the customer can set up his or her own dashboards, or you can set them up for them and see all of that information. So basically, you install that controller or computer, you put it in at the edge, you're up and running. And then at that point, you just set up all the users just like you would at a traditional system of other applications. And there's going to be a fee on an annual basis, similar to what you pay for a gateway, but there's no more gateways now too, right? There's one less SKU because the modem is fully integrated into the device. So there's less footprint on the bypass panel, one less thing to manage. All my security is taken care of. And then once you're set up, you're up and running. And it's pretty simple from there.
Kevin, what are some of the opportunities that we need to be looking for on our next service visit?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is what we really ask our people to do is be respectfully irreverent, ask why, right? When I'm on a service visit, why am I doing it this way? What if I could do this differently? And start asking those questions. That starts driving us towards the opportunities that we may be missing. A lot of times we're just comfortable doing it the same way we've always done it. So if I look at how I'm testing and how I'm completing my reports, there's great technology coming with a lot of integration opportunities. So really asking those questions really puts you in a mindset about what opportunities are there for you instead of just going through the same routine each time.
Where do you see emerging technologies? Where is this going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a great question. First of all, sensor technology continues to evolve, which makes our life better. You're going to start to see in a computer versus controller model, you're going to start to see agnostic approaches to sensing technology where it's not necessarily, if I buy brand X, I buy their sensor. You might see integration. You're going to see more digital integration. The interfaces are simplifying where it was very difficult to integrate digital sensing technology. Now it's much more user-friendly. You're going to see that. The gateway will disappear. You won't be buying gateways in the future. The other thing is, because of that digital technology, you're going to see this issue of I/O, which we talk about how many powered relays do I need, how many analog inputs, that will all start to fade away. You're going to be operating on a bus and you won't have to worry about buying inputs. So basically, you're going to get a smaller device. It's going to be much smarter, easier to install, and you're going to start gathering a lot more information out of there. You're going to see those technologies coming.
How can water treatment professionals best prepare themselves for the future of smart technology?
Yeah. So the first thing is it's already happening, right? It's already around us. So we need to be asking ourselves, what is going on in my business? Where can I evolve? And not just say I'm comfortable doing what I'm doing, right? I need to look for experimentation. One of the biggest concerns people have about technology is their fear is, how do I deploy this technology with everything that I have? So they just need to grasp that nothing is a wholesale change. You're going to start to integrate smart technology alongside of your legacy environment. So look for wins. So the way you start preparing is finding a friendly client out there, finding a place that you can go ahead and put something in place. What really kicked off the cellular industry is when we started putting cell phones in customers' hands. And once they used it, they started coming back saying, geez, I didn't know I could do this. Or with the installations in the water treatment, the person comes back and says, wow, now that this is happening, what if? Could I do this now? And we're saying, yeah, absolutely. And then they provide us great feedback. So the process continues to expand. So it's really taking a hard look at your business, saying, where can I implement something simple with a little bit of risk, start working with it. And then that'll foster a whole lot of questions and ideas. And then it makes the transition easier. I think people are overwhelmed. They think they have to transition their entire business, and they don't. They just need to start, just begin.
So there's somebody out there in the Scaling Up Nation. They just started a few weeks ago. They just got their test kit. It is shiny new. And this is the first podcast that they've ever heard in the water treatment industry. And they're thinking, how do I implement this? I just started. I just learned how to run some of my pinks and blues. What do you want them to know?
Yeah, we found is with the new people coming on board, they love this. We want to let them know that the technology that they're using on their mobile phones and things that they're accustomed to every day is now available to them. That's really where we've seen the best parts. We just encourage them to say, hey, it's great. It's going to be more exciting. You're going to implement this technology. It's going to get better and better. And as quotas go up every year, as you're being tasked to do more, this is not a threat to your job. This is actually going to enable you to increase your customer engagement. You're going to be really excited. It's going to make your life better. You're going to be able to grow your business. And most importantly, all that hard work you're going to do selling, you're going to find that as you engage with this kind of technology with your customer retention is going to be better. And so you're going to be in a place to grow your business because you're going to keep that customer and the lifetime value will improve. And that's exciting stuff to be really excited about the technology.
Now, you've been doing this for a long time. What are some pitfalls that we can avoid from your experience?
You know, that one of the big pitfalls is, again, avoidance, right? It's not perfect. It doesn't going to cover everything. So I'm just not going to do anything. The other pitfall is be patient. Start small. Small beginnings are okay. Sometimes we try to eat the elephant in one bite, as they say. You know, it's a little bite at a time. And if you just keep a positive attitude and look for the wins instead of focusing on some of the challenges out of the box, I think you'll be really excited. Those are really the pitfalls. It's really about perception and just diving in.
Now, how do listeners find out more about this topic and what you do, and how can they find you?
Yeah, they can find us at energyresourceproducts.com. It's sort of long. There's an S at the end of that. Pretty much any information they need to find there, email, they can contact us there. As far as information on smart technology, we would just say stay engaged with what you're doing around the rest of your life. The way you're listening to podcasts and the way you're, reading and looking at different applications, and just know that that is all coming into the field. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, it is an exciting time also where we don't have to be the ones that are doing all the work. We can do the things that take the skill, and we can allow the machines to process all the data and make us better.
Yeah, it's just a great tool. And if we understand that it's a great tool, it makes us better professionals. It makes us much more intentional about the way we make decisions and take action. And we get better outcomes if we're more intentional.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all that with the Scaling Up Nation. I do have a few lightning round questions for you if you're ready.
I'm ready. Okay.
If you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as a service provider, what advice would you give?
Be patient. It's going to take longer than you plan. Remember, the journey is the destination, right?
What are the last few books that you've read?
I've read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, some of the classics, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and then C.S. Lewis, The Problem with Pain.
C.S. Lewis is a very interesting author.
He is, absolutely.
When they make a movie about your life, who do you want playing Kevin?
John Lithgow.
Great answer.
He's got tremendous range, drama, and comedy. So,
my final question, if you could talk to anybody throughout history, who would it be with and why?
actually, it's C.S. Lewis. I think, when you look at the radio broadcast he did nationwide, it was a time of turmoil in the world coming out of World War II. Critical thinking, he had his group of Inklings, just had a fascinating approach to life and the things that drive the human behavior. I think it would be a great conversation.
Well, I thought this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast and sharing a little bit about what you do.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Scale Up Nation, I love learning from our guests. And of course, embracing new technologies is so important in water treatment. And now we've got smart tech and artificial intelligence and all these things that are making us more efficient, that are making it easier for you and I to collaborate with each other, and allowing us to use our data in ways that we just couldn't do before, or at least we couldn't do it without putting in a whole bunch of work. Now, we've got the robots doing a lot of the work with that information, and now we're able to take the outcome of that information and put it into practice so we can be better industrial water treaters, so we can do better work for our customers. Our customers' equipment is running more efficiently. The bottom line of our customers is more bottom and more line, and everybody wins as long as the machines don't become self-aware. As long as that doesn't happen, everything is awesome. And Nation, it is just really cool how we are able to use our technology and information so we can improve our outcome. So everything, of course, we talked about in today's episode, we're going to have mention of that in our show notes page. And as many of you are finding out, that we have a discussion guide for all of our episodes this year to try to make conversations for you and your team just a little bit easier so you can extract the information that we're talking about on this episode, on every episode with your team so you can take your water treatment prowess to the next level. And Nation, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise the bar in the industrial water treatment industry. We're doing that one water treater at a time. We're doing that with the entire Scaling Up Nation. And Nation, we are seeing a difference. I get people that talk to me all the time and say they tried something new. They met somebody new. They decided that they were going to do something totally different with how they were normally running their service. You name it, people are inspired to become better. And I hope that I am describing you. And I hope that this podcast can just bring a little spark to make all of us just a little bit better at being in the best profession in the world. Nation, I hope you have a terrific week, and we'll have a brand new episode for you next week. Until then, take care, folks. Want to ensure you're fully prepared for the Certified Water Technologist examination? Our CWT prep course provides you with the tools and knowledge you need. From detailed study guides to a 100-question practice exam, we've got you covered. Visit scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep and start your journey to certification.